Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a journey that sits squarely between breathtaking natural beauty and some, well, deeply unsettling history. We're heading straight into the Pacific Northwest to explore the most widely reported haunted places in Oregon. It's a state, defined by its lush forests and stunning coastlines. But underneath all that green, there's a truly dark and turbulent past, just waiting to surface.
That contrast is absolutely key. If you are looking for localized paranormal activity, Oregon is it's a real hotbed because the history is so saturated with trauma.
Right.
Think about the perils of the Oregon Trail that ended here, the dangerous, isolated military posts, and especially the port cities like Portland at the turn of the 20th century, where forced labor and human trafficking, what we know as Shanghai, were just rampant. All of that danger, that suffering, it's soaked into the very structures of the state, creating, well, prime conditions for lingering specific hauntings.
Exactly. And that is our mission today, really.
Yeah.
We're synthesizing reports from historic hotels, abandoned institutions, desolate roadways, trying to understand the common threads of haunting in the Pacific Northwest. What kind of ghosts tend to stick around? Let's kick things off where many visitors begin. The historic hotels, places where the spirits are essentially permanent residents, often tied to either, great luxury or sudden tragedy.
Yeah, the hospitality sector in Oregon has certainly absorbed some history. You pretty much have to start with the Geiser Grand Hotel in Baker City. It opened way back in 1889, height of the gold rush, and it was nicknamed the Queen of the Mines. Very high-class society back then, and the specific haunts, they kind of reflect that initial grandeur.
One of the most famous residents is the Lady in Blue, Annabelle, right? Lived in room 302. Apparently, she still considers the hotel saloon her territory, and she is famously known for pinching the butts of men who dare to sit at her favorite bar stool.
Very specific boundaries.
I appreciate that. Some spirits maintain their boundaries, even in the afterlife.
Very specific boundaries indeed. And that high society vibe, it doesn't always translate to peace and quiet. Staff frequently report phantom parties.
Right.
Hearing laughter, talking, glasses clinking from rooms that are completely empty. It's like a residual echo of the revelry the place was famous for.
But not all the high-class ghosts are friendly, are they? Yep. There's the very agitated, headless ghost of a former chef.
Yes.
Who reportedly died when the dumbwaiter door fell and, well, decapitated him. His rage manifests as slamming doors. Now, the sources claim he once levitated a large crate of glasses before letting it crash. How often do we actually see that? A ghost moving from, slamming doors, which could be residual, to physically manipulating a heavy object like a crate.
Well, that's the crucial distinction, isn't it, between residual energy and an intelligent haunting. A feat like levitating a crate would require tremendous intentional energy. It pushes that story into the realm of truly powerful, targeted poltergeist activity, or maybe just a fantastic embellishment of a really traumatic death. Either way, his presence is described as undeniably violent and localized right there in the kitchen area.
Okay. Speaking of localized trauma and historical transit, let's head south. Wolf Creek Inn and Tavern, this is the oldest operational hotel in the Northwest, dates back to 1883, served as a key stagecoach stop.
Definitely holds literary prestige. Jack London stayed there, finished writing The Valley of the Moon in one of the rooms, apparently, and his apparition is still seen lingering sometimes. But the Wolf Creek Inn also delivers one of the most bizarre and isolated sightings in the state.
Okay, you're talking about the reports of the vampire-like creature with fangs and blood around its mouth.
Yeah.
Rumored to have bitten a guest once. Hang on. We just jumped from a guy getting his butt pinched by a society ghost to a full-on cryptid. Is there any historical basis for this specific figure, or is this just, a tall tale compared to the other established ghosts?
Most serious paranormal researchers treat the vampire story as folklore, certainly. It's an extreme outlier, yeah? However, it exists in the sources because I think it reflects the deep isolation of that region back then. Wolf Creek was a rugged, dangerous stop. It attracted rougher people, And that gave rise to darker legends than you'd find in a city hotel. It shows the varied nature of the fears absorbed by the land, sort of.
That's a good point, the geography affecting the legend. Okay, shifting locales entirely, let's look at the Hot Lake Hotel in Hot Springs near La Grande. This place has been through everything. A healing center for Native Americans, a high-end resort, then an asylum, and a sanitarium.
It's a historical magnet for suffering, really. That transition from a place of natural healing to one of institutional despair. That's why the hauntings are apparently so pervasive. You hear reports of phantom piano music roaming the halls, even though no physical instrument exists today.
and the original piano itself was supposedly haunted before it even arrived,
Yeah.
leading its owner to get rid of it and then commit
Yeah.
suicide. Wow. Even the furniture couldn't handle the atmosphere.
It's institutional tragedy filtered through these strange details, isn't it? We also have the ghost of a gardener who hanged himself behind the building, often accompanied, they say, by the sudden, ominous appearance of heavy fog near the lake. This clearly shows that shift we see across Oregon, away from high society revelers toward entities rooted in pain and institutional failure, which is a significant common thread in the state's history.
Which brings us inevitably to the McMenamins properties. They're masters of converting historical, often institutional buildings into resorts. Edgefield in Troutdale is a prime example, formerly the Multnomah County Poor Farm starting in 1911.
Yeah, the poor farm. It housed the sick, the homeless, the elderly, the mentally ill people the mainstream society had effectively marginalized and, well, discarded. The sense of despair there is supposed to be immense.
And the reports are genuinely unsettling. Staff allegedly found animal bones arranged in a pentagram in room 215. But then, juxtaposed against that darkness, there's a surprisingly friendly, elderly woman ghost. Reportedly smells of flowery perfume.
Uh-huh.
I suppose if you're stuck in the afterlife, you still want to make sure the guests are tidy.
Apparently so. She'll throw clothes out the window if guests leave room 215 too messy. It's a nice, strange mix of malevolence and housekeeping. And if we look downtown in Portland, the White Eagle Saloon, built in 1905, was a bar and brothel, again, a place focused on marginalized groups.
Guests there report feeling cold hands touching them, being physically unable to get out of bed, attributed to spirits like Rose, a prostitute supposedly killed there, or Sam, a former housekeeper. This transition really shows that the places where people were most exploited or marginalized in life, often that's where their spirits remain most active, where the residual energy is most potent.
It provides a necessary historical grounding for the folklore, definitely.
That theme of marginalized history is exactly what defines our next segment, as we transition away from hotels and look at the ghosts of infrastructure and societal trauma. And nothing highlights Portland's seedy past better than the Shanghai tunnels.
Oh, absolutely. These are the infamous labyrinthine passages beneath Portland streets, tied directly to illegal gambling, opium dens, and human trafficking. Shanghaiing, it refers to the forced kidnapping of sailors and workers, often drugged, who'd wake up already at sea, indentured to a ship. It was a massive, horrific operation.
Yeah, the sources confirm that visitors who tour the tunnels today report powerful, ghostly encounters. Disembodied voices, a heavy residual energy. It speaks directly to the suffering and forced captivity that happened down there. It is a terrifying glimpse into the city's dangerous foundations.
Moving out to the coast, the history shifts a bit. To military trauma and maritime isolation, Fort Stevens near Warrenton served all the way from the Civil War to WWII. Here, the lingering spirit is reportedly a soldier in a 1940s uniform who just vanishes after giving a simple nod to passersby on the seaside promenade, just a silent echo of wartime duty.
Right. In stark contrast to that military presence is the isolation of Heceta Head Lighthouse near Florence. The keeper's house operates as a B&B haunted by the Gray Lady, or Rue. She gained her name, quite remarkably, through a Ouija board seance conducted by some community college students back in the 70s.
Rue is described as a decidedly benign spirit, typically focused on looking after the house and its maintenance. The perfect coastal ghost, really. The story of the worker who broke a window in the attic, refused to go back in because she had manifested to him, and then found the broken glass neatly swept into a pile that truly highlights her maternal, tidy nature.
Now, for the open road, let's talk about the quintessential regional legend. Highway 101, especially near Cannon Beach, home of the Bandage Man.
Ah, yes. This is a classic, terrifying phantom hitchhiker story. Sightings of this disfigured man wrapped entirely in bloody bandages. They date back over 60 years to the early 1960s. He's been seen on the side of the road, sometimes suddenly appearing in the rearview mirror, or even, and this is the most alarming found, sitting silently in the back seat, only to disappear when the driver turns around.
That is deeply unsettling, because it feels so localized and visceral, doesn't it? It's not a vague military man or a society ghost. It's a terrifying, specific figure linked to travel. The sources even suggest the best place to sight him is specifically at night on the abandoned old highway that runs parallel to the main 101 route. Suggests a very specific traumatic event happened right there.
Absolutely. The persistent, specific nature of that legend is what makes it stick in the regional consciousness.
Okay, let's wrap up our deep dive by looking at specific locations defined by sudden, tragic death or outright malevolent activity. We have the highlight, Lafayette Cemetery.
This location is infamous. The story is of a woman supposedly hanged in the 1800s for witchcraft. Now, the witchcraft part has been widely debunked. She was actually the mother of a convicted axe murderer. But the local legend alleges she cursed the town to burn down 3 times. And Lafayette has indeed burned down twice since, so the folklore has certainly taken root.
And the ghost is clearly not benign. The female apparition is reported to scream at visitors, laugh while chasing people out of the cemetery. The high number of malevolent attack reports is ultimately why the cemetery was closed to the public. That's a serious physical safety concern coming from a spirit.
Contrast that hostility with the stately Pittock mansion in Portland, beautiful 16,000 square foot home, built by Henry Pittock, publisher of the Oregonian, and his wife Georgiana. The original owners are believed to still roam, but they're described as playful, not malicious.
Right, they just enjoy spooking visitors by moving furniture, closing windows, maybe locking them in rooms sometimes. Reports include strange women reflected in mirrors when visitors are sure they're alone. It sounds like they just enjoy their beautifully preserved house and the constant stream of admiring visitors.
A very high-class, non-threatening form of haunting, you could say, befitting their historical role. Now let's look at a tragedy localized in a common community hub, South Eugene High School.
Ugh, the famous haunting there. A student, Robert Gronka, sometimes reported as Turnbull, who tragically fell to his death from the auditorium catwalk onto metal seats back in the late 1950s.
His spirit is apparently seen as a shadowy form in the balcony, and he's heard walking around up there. What's fascinating here is the sheer specificity of his character remaining. He's known to get particularly ornery, as they say, when the school's current students play heavy metal music in the auditorium.
A ghost with very clear traditional musical preferences. That detail really roots the spirit in his time period, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's the persistence of personality, even in death.
Our final tragic spirit brings us to Cathedral Park in Portland, named for the Gothic arches of the St. John's Bridge. But its dark reputation comes from the murder of a 15-year-old girl there in 1949.
Locals today still report hearing the terrified screams of a young girl near the Willamette River, often just before sunset, a horrific residual echo of that specific sudden violence. It's a chilling reminder that the hauntings of Oregon are rarely vague. They are usually tied directly to a moment of historical pain.
So connecting all these threads, from the headless chef in Baker City to the poor farm residents in Troutdale, the bandaged man on the coast, what does this wide array of sources tell us about the common denominator in Oregon's spectral history?
Well, the striking commonality, I think, is that Oregon's hauntings are tied directly to the history of how people died or how they lived on the margins. Labor accidents, institutional suffering, forced captivity, specific unsolved personal tragedies. These are not generic spirits. They are highly localized and linked to specific, hard historical realities of settling and building a state on the frontier. The spirits really reflect the forgotten human cost of that whole enterprise.
That makes the suffering deeply resonant even today. Looking back at our consensus most haunted locations, the Geiser Grand Hotel, Heceta Head Lighthouse, McMenamins Edgefield, and Highway 101, they all share that intense link to historical hardship and, well, neglect.
Right. Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given that so many of Oregon's most famous and active hauntings occur in places that were institutions for the poor, the sick, the exploited, or the criminally marginalized, the poor farm, the sanitariums, the brothels, the Shanghai tunnels, what does the persistence of these particular spirits tell us about the hidden social costs of Oregon's settlement and growth, and whose stories the state has historically chosen to forget?
A truly dark and pervasive undercurrent to America's greenest state. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Oregon's spectral history. We'll see you next time.